When I bought the old Bradford house, I thought I was buying peace. It stood at the corner of Maple and 7th, 3 stories of fading glory, with ivy crawling up the brick and porch columns cracked from 100 winters. Locals called it the widow's house. Some said it was cursed. I called it home. I'd just come out of a brutal divorce. Starting over wasn't just an idea, it was survival. That house represented everything I wanted: freedom, history, and maybe someday redemption. 3 weeks after I moved in, I got the letter, folded under my doormat. It was printed on stiff white paper, with the embossed seal of the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. I didn't even know I was in an HOA. "Dear Mr. Carter," it read, "it has come to our attention that unapproved modifications are being made to your property in violation of HOA guidelines. Cease all renovation immediately or face fines up to $250 per day. Respectfully, HOA President Karen Walters." Yeah, Karen. The name fit perfectly. I laughed at first. My unapproved modifications were replacing rotted window frames and repainting the porch. But then I saw the fine print at the bottom. Further violations may result in legal action. That's when my stomach twisted. The next morning, I went to the HOA office, a converted garage behind Karen's house. Inside, everything smelled like lavender air freshener and control issues. Karen sat behind a desk stacked with binders labeled fence colors, mailbox compliance, and holiday decorations. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Hi," I said. "I'm Michael Carter. You sent me a letter about my house." "Oh, yes," she interrupted, finally glancing up. "The Bradford property. You can't just start tearing things apart. Mr. Carter, we have standards in this neighborhood." I smiled politely. "I'm just restoring it." The windows were falling apart. Paint was peeling. "Unapproved paint colors," she said, tapping her pen. "And those wood trims? Not in the community style." "Community style?" I repeated. "The house was built in 1894. Karen crossed her arms. "That's not the point. Everyone must submit renovation plans for approval." Something in her tone snapped a nerve in me. "With all due respect," I said, "this house existed before your HOA even existed. I'm not asking permission to fix something older than this entire neighborhood." Her lips tightened. "You'll have to comply, Mr. Carter, or I'll have no choice but to issue formal fines." I took a breath, forcing calm. "Then I guess I'll see you in court." I turned and walked out. But inside I was boiling. That week, the letters started piling up. One for unauthorized scaffolding, one for non-conforming mailbox replacement, even one for improper lawn maintenance. I didn't even have a lawn, just dirt and bricks waiting to be landscaped. It became clear what was happening. Karen was trying to make me give up. Neighbors started whispering when I walked by. Some looked away, others smiled awkwardly. Finally, one older man across the street, "Mr. Langley," called out as I was hauling lumber one afternoon. "You the new owner of the widow's house?" "Yeah," I said, dropping the boards. "Trying to fix her up." He nodded slowly. "Careful with the HOA. Karen runs it like her personal kingdom." "Yeah, I noticed," I muttered. Langley leaned closer. "She fined my wife once for having a pink flower pot. Said it clashed with the aesthetic. We've been here 30 years. I laughed bitterly. "Guess I'm next on her list." He gave me a look, the kind that says you have no idea. 2 weeks later, things escalated. I woke up to find a bright orange sticker slapped across my front door. "Stop work order, HOA enforcement." I ripped it off, furious, and called the number listed. Karen answered. "Karen, what the hell is this?" "Oh, Mr. Carter," she said in her sugary tone. "You were warned multiple times. Until your renovations are reviewed and approved by the HOA, all work must stop." "I already told you," I snapped. "You don't have authority over this house." She laughed softly. "Oh, I assure you we do. Every property in Meadowbrook falls under our jurisdiction." That's when I said something I probably shouldn't have. "Then maybe it's time someone reminded you that this neighborhood doesn't belong to you." There was a pause. Then she said, "We'll see about that." Click. By the end of the week, I had 3 fines, each totaling over $750. One was for working without HOA authorization, another for non-compliant exterior color palette, and the last one, I kid you not, was for excessive construction noise. It was just me and a radio. I tried reasoning with the city inspector. He shrugged. "HOA's private governance, man. We don't interfere unless it's code enforcement. That night, I sat on my porch, staring at the cracked columns and peeling paint. My dream of restoring the Bradford house was slipping through my fingers. Then, as I flipped through some of the old papers I'd found in the attic, deeds, maps, handwritten letters from the 1900s, something caught my eye. A historic district map. At the bottom, in faded ink, it read, Registered Historic Properties of Old Meadowbrook District. And right there, listed in perfect cursive, was my address, 412 Maple Street, the Bradford House. I froze. I'd heard rumors that part of the neighborhood was technically a historic zone, but no one seemed to know where the line was. If this document was real, the house wasn't just part of the HOA's area, it was outside its jurisdiction. The next morning I drove to the county archives, and Karen helped me pull up the original zoning documents. She squinted at the screen, then smiled. "Oh, honey," she said, "this isn't just historic. The Bradford property is the center of the old Meadowbrook Historic District. Everything else around it was built later. So, does the HOA have any authority over it?" She chuckled. "Not unless they've been running the city planning department lately." I grinned slowly. "Can I get a certified copy of that record?" "Sure thing, sweetheart." "You want one or two? Better make it 3. That night, I pinned the certified map right on my front door, exactly where the HOA had slapped their sticker. The next morning, Karen showed up in person. She strutted up the walkway like she owned the ground under her heels, clutching a clipboard. "Mr. Carter," she said coldly, "you're in direct violation of multiple HOA statutes. You can't just—" I cut her off and pointed to the document. "Actually, I can. This property is officially recognized as part of the old Meadowbrook Historic District. You see that date? 1894. Your HOA was founded in 1978. She blinked, then frowned. "That doesn't mean—" "It means," I said, stepping closer, "you don't have jurisdiction here. The HOA can't enforce anything on this property without violating state preservation laws." Karen's jaw tightened. "We'll see about that." "Please do," I said with a smile, "because I already have a lawyer and a city historian who'd love to explain it to you." She stared at me, speechless for once. Then she spun around and stormed off. As she disappeared down the street, I finally let myself smile. Because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. For a few days, it was quiet. Too quiet. Karen didn't call, no more letters came, and the HOA Facebook group went silent. Even the neighbors avoided eye contact when I walked down the street. It was the kind of silence that doesn't mean peace. It means plotting. I kept working on the house anyway. The scent of sawdust filled the halls. Sunlight streamed through freshly restored stained glass. And for the first time, the old Bradford house started to feel alive again. Then, one morning, I came outside to find my truck windshield smashed. At first, I thought it was random vandalism. Until I saw what was written in red spray paint across the hood. My stomach dropped. I took photos, filed a police report, and, you guessed it, the responding officer said what I feared. "Looks like HOA trouble, but unless you catch him in the act, not much we can do." That night I sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee, staring at the dark houses across the street. Curtains moved. Lights flickered off. I knew someone was watching. The next day the city inspector arrived, unannounced. "Morning," he said, stepping out of his truck. "Got a complaint about unauthorized structural changes." "From who?" I asked, though I already knew. He hesitated. "Can't say." "Anonymous report." "Of course." He walked through the house, took photos, scribbled notes. When he was done, he looked at me, shaking his head. "Everything's up to code," he said. "Whoever's complaining doesn't understand how permits work." I smiled grimly. "Oh, they understand. They just don't like losing control." He chuckled. "Well, you're good, Mr. Carter, but maybe keep your eyes open. People like that don't let go easy." He wasn't wrong. 2 evenings later, as I was sanding the banister, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Karen standing there, flanked by 2 men in matching polos with Meadowbrook HOA enforcement embroidered on them. "Mr. Carter," she said crisply, "this is your final warning. You are creating a disturbance in our community." I raised an eyebrow. "A disturbance? By fixing my own house? You've caused division among neighbors. You've disrespected HOA authority. And you've refused to comply with rules that don't apply to me, I interrupted. You're trespassing, by the way. One of the men stepped forward. We're allowed to be here. No, I said. You're not. I reached behind the door and held up a copy of the county's certified historic district map, the same one she'd seen before. This isn't HOA property. You're on protected land. Karen's face flushed red. Protected land? She spat. You think that gives you the right to make a mockery of our community? I think, I said, calm but firm, it gives me the right to live without being bullied. Her eyes glinted. You'll regret this, Mr. Carter. You don't know who you're dealing with. I smiled faintly. Neither do you. She turned on her heel and stormed off again, but this time, I could tell she wasn't walking away to surrender. She was walking away to plan something worse. The next week was hell. My water pressure suddenly dropped to nothing. I called the utility company. Someone had accidentally reported a leak. My garbage pickup stopped. Unpaid HOA dues, they said. And one morning, I woke up to find a giant banner stretched across my front yard that read, Outlaw property unsafe for children. That one hurt, because now it wasn't just me. It was the whole neighborhood turning against me, or at least pretending to. I started recording everything, every conversation, every visit, every letter. If Karen wanted a war, I was going to give her one. One afternoon, while searching through more of the Bradford archives in the attic, I found something unexpected, a leather-bound folder tucked behind an old chest. Inside were yellow documents, stamped and signed by the city council, and one line caught my eye immediately. Designation: ownership of the old Meadowbrook. Historic district shall remain vested in the Bradford Foundation and its legal heirs. Ownership. Not just designation, ownership. My heart started racing. I flipped to the last page. A list of heirs, ending with the last known descendant, Margaret Bradford, who'd passed away 5 years ago. I pulled up the public records database on my phone. Margaret Bradford's estate had been sold by her attorney to me, which meant I didn't just own the house. I owned the entire historic district, the land, the zoning rights, even the regulations that defined where the HOA's boundaries ended. The realization hit me like lightning. Karen and her HOA weren't just wrong. They were operating illegally over a property they didn't even have the right to govern. And the irony? Their entire neighborhood was technically built on land leased from the Bradford estate, which I now owned outright. I couldn't help it. I started laughing. Not just a chuckle. A deep, relieved, disbelieving laugh. For weeks, they'd treated me like an outsider. But in truth, they were the guests here. The next morning, I called a meeting. I printed flyers and dropped them in every mailbox in Meadowbrook. Community meeting. Saturday, 5 p.m. Hosted by Michael Carter, owner of the old Meadowbrook Historic District. Location: the Bradford house front lawn. Let's talk about who really owns this place. I knew Karen would come. She couldn't resist an audience. When Saturday came, nearly half the neighborhood showed up. Some stood awkwardly on the sidewalk, others brought lawn chairs. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Karen arrived late, of course, wearing her best power suit and clutching her clipboard like a weapon. Mr. Carter, she said loudly, this is not an authorized HOA gathering. Actually, I said, stepping up onto my porch, it's not an HOA gathering at all. The crowd quieted. I held up the documents I'd found, the certified district map, the property deeds, and the original ownership clause. This, I said, is the official record of the old Meadowbrook Historic District. This land was established in 1894 under the Bradford Foundation, and that ownership never transferred to the HOA. I flipped to the last page and held it up for everyone to see, which means every property here, every street, every mailbox sits on land owned by the Bradford estate. And as of 3 months ago, that estate belongs to me. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's face drained of color. That's ridiculous, she stammered. You can't. I can, I said firmly. And the city confirmed it yesterday. She looked around, desperate for support. But the crowd wasn't with her anymore. People were whispering, checking their phones, looking uneasy. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. The HOA will immediately cease all Enforcement actions within the historic district. Any fines issued against my property are void. And from this point on, I'll be reviewing the legality of every regulation you've imposed. Over the last 40 years, the silence was electric. Then a neighbor, Mr. Langley, spoke up from the back. Wait, does that mean she's been fining us illegally? I nodded. Looks that way. More whispers. Some angry, some shocked. Karen's hands trembled. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly, I said. You've bullied people for years under rules that were never yours to enforce. That ends now. She took a shaky step back, her face pale. This isn't over, she muttered, then turned and pushed through the crowd. I watched her leave, feeling both victorious and strangely heavy. Because as satisfying as it was to win, something told me she wasn't done yet. For a week after the meeting, the neighborhood was buzzing. People I'd never spoken to before started waving when they passed by. A few even came up to apologize and, quietly, like they were afraid Karen might still be listening. I told them I didn't hold grudges. The truth was, I didn't have the energy for hate anymore. I just wanted peace and to finish restoring my house. But Karen? She disappeared. No phone calls, no letters, no meetings. It was almost eerie, like the whole HOA had dissolved overnight. Until one cold morning, I opened my front door and found a notice taped to my window. Only this time, it wasn't from the HOA. It was from the city. Notice of historic violation. Unauthorized structural alteration of protected property. I blinked, reading it twice. Karen had gone around me and filed a complaint with the State Historic Commission. 2 days later, I was sitting in a hearing room downtown, across from a panel of 3 officials. Karen sat on the other side, flanked by a lawyer in an expensive suit. She looked smug again, like she'd finally found her way to win. Mr. Carter, the chairman said, flipping through a folder, we've received reports of unauthorized changes to a registered historic property under your ownership. Is that correct? I nodded. I've been restoring it, yes, but all my work has been up to preservation standards. You can check my permits. Karen's lawyer leaned forward. The issue, Chairman, is that Mr. Carter has modified original elements of the property, including replacing vintage wood with modern materials, without proper oversight. I frowned. That's not true. I used reclaimed wood from the same era. I even followed the state's restoration guidebook. Karen's lawyer smiled faintly. And where is your approval from the Historic District Board? I froze, because I didn't have one. Technically, I was the owner of the historic district, but ownership didn't exempt me from the bureaucratic side of preservation law. I'd restored everything by the book, except for one thing. I hadn't submitted the paperwork. The trap had been perfectly set. Karen's eyes gleamed as the chairman said, "We'll review this carefully. Until then, all renovation activity is suspended." I exhaled slowly, trying to stay calm. But inside, I felt the same cold rage I'd felt the first day she slipped that letter under my doormat. That night, I sat alone in the dim glow of a single lamp, surrounded by the walls of the house I'd fought for. I could almost hear it, the creak of the old wood, the whisper of time in its bones. This house had stood through wars, storms, and generations, and now it was being strangled by paperwork. I thought about giving up, selling, leaving. But then I remembered what this house had given me, a chance to rebuild my life, to heal. And what Karen had given me, a reason to fight for something bigger than myself. I wasn't fighting over wood or paint anymore. I was fighting for the right to belong. The next morning, I went back to the archives. Marjorie, the same clerk who'd helped me before, saw me walk in and sighed. "Back again, huh?" "Yeah," I said. "I need to find something. Anything." She smiled. "Honey, with you, that usually means trouble." For hours, I combed through boxes of records, city council minutes, zoning reports, correspondence between the original Bradford Foundation and the state. Then, near the bottom of an old folder, I found something incredible. A handwritten letter dated 1911. To whom it may concern, the Bradford estate shall retain not only ownership but full oversight and preservation, authority over all properties, within the district boundaries, in perpetuity. The board of the foundation shall act as the sole preservation body to ensure the integrity of our heritage. Oversight authority. That meant I, as the legal successor of the Bradford Foundation, wasn't. Just exempt from the preservation board's approval. I was the preservation board. Karen had used the law to trap me. But the law itself was on my side all along. I gathered the documents, had them verified by a city historian, and called for an emergency hearing. This time the tables were turned. Karen was there again, sitting in her same stiff posture, though this time she looked slightly less sure of herself. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she didn't respond. When the chairman called my name, I stepped forward with quiet confidence. "Mr. Carter," he said, "you've requested this follow-up hearing to present new evidence?" "Yes, sir," I said, "and I think it'll clear everything up." I handed them the original 1911 letter and the certification documents showing the Bradford Foundation's transfer of rights, ending with my ownership. They read in silence. The room was so still I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, the chairman looked up. "Mr. Carter, are you saying you hold the legal preservation authority over the old Meadowbrook Historic District?" "Yes, sir," I said. "It's all right there." He adjusted his glasses, flipping through the verification stamp. "Well, I have to say this is unprecedented." Karen's lawyer stammered. This can't be accurate. There's no way." But the chairman interrupted him. "It's valid. These documents have full legal standing." Then he turned to me. "Mr. Carter, it appears you not only followed preservation standards, you had the authority to approve them yourself." He smiled faintly. "In short, you're free to continue your renovations." I nodded, heart pounding. "Thank you, sir." And then, just before I turned to leave, I added, "Oh, and one more thing. I'll be filing a claim against the HOA for harassment and probably property interference, using their power to target residents. That ends today." The chairman nodded. "That's your right." Karen looked pale, but not angry this time. Just lost. Outside, the winter air bit at my skin. The city felt alive again, loud, free, and full of second chances. A few days later, the news hit the local papers. "Homeowner exposes HOA overreach, revealed as legal owner of historic district." People in Meadowbrook celebrated quietly. HOA signs came down. Karen resigned. Neighbors who'd once avoided me started coming over to help with the renovations. Even the old man across the street, Mr. Langley, showed up one morning with a toolbox and 2 cups of coffee. "Guess you scared the dragon," he said with a grin. "Maybe," I said. "But sometimes dragons just need to be shown they're not the only ones with fire." He laughed. "You should put that on a plaque." Months passed. The Bradford house finally stood tall again. Restored, reborn, alive. Its stained glass gleamed like jewels at sunset, and the porch that once sagged under the weight of time now welcomed visitors again. On the front lawn, I installed a small bronze sign that read, "The Bradford House, restored 2025 by Michael Carter. Dedicated to everyone who's ever been told they don't belong." Neighbors came to see it. Kids ran across the grass. Someone brought cookies. And for the first time, Meadowbrook felt like a community, not a dictatorship. One afternoon, as I was repainting the trim, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there she was. Karen. She looked different. No clipboard. No tight bun. Just a plain gray sweater and tired eyes. "I came to apologize," she said softly. I lowered my brush, studying her. "Apologize?" She nodded, clutching a small envelope. I let power get to my head. I thought running the HOA gave me purpose, but I forgot it was supposed to serve people, not control them. She handed me the envelope. "These are all your fines, voided. I thought you might want them for closure." I took them quietly. "Thank you." She hesitated. "You were right, you know. This neighborhood doesn't belong to me." I smiled faintly. "It doesn't belong to me either. It belongs to everyone who loves it enough to take care of it." She nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. "Good luck with the house, Mr. Carter." And then she walked away, for real this time. That night, as I stood on my porch under the soft glow of the streetlight, I realized something. The fight had never really been about walls, paint, or property lines. It had been about ownership of spirit. Sometimes people cling to power because they're afraid of losing control. Sometimes you have to fight them, not to destroy them, but to remind them what community really means. The Bradford house had taught me that. You can rebuild a house, you can restore history. But the real renovation, the one that matters, happens inside you. Epilogue. A year later, the city officially not